This is a Full and Bloom interview with producer-engineer Jim Faraci. Inside the album, LA Guns, the 1988 self-titled album. You can listen to more interviews with Jim at fullandbloom.com. Click the link in the description. Okay, so we're going to talk some LA Guns.
Okay.
Did you work with them when they still had Paul Black in the band?
Yeah, I started with them. I cut their first demos to get them their deal on Polygram with Bob Scoro.
Okay, and then those first demos, they actually signed the deal with Paul?
Yeah, they were managed by a guy named Alan Jones, and Marshall Burrell, who was RATT's manager, was friendly with Alan, and Marshall went to see them and said, hey, this band is really good. They're looking for a producer and engineer. Do you want to do this band? And I went to meet him. I said, yeah, and it took off from there. So, yes, it was Paul Black was the singer. We cut all the demos. We were getting ready. We were gearing up for the record when they let Paul go.
Were you surprised by that, or did you expect that?
I wasn't. Paul had some pretty serious addiction problems, and the rest of the guys, especially Mick and Tracii, were pretty serious guys. And there was always problems with Paul. From the beginning, there was always issues with Paul. Always. Which was too bad, because he was a good singer. He was a nice guy, but he wouldn't show up. He'd show up late. You could tell when he was too high to really get anything done. It was one of those things. Once they got a deal, they said, are we going to proceed with this guy, or are we going to go find someone else? So Alan knew Philip from not Choir Boys. I forget what his band was.
From Girl.
And he brought him over from London. Why don't you sing with these guys? And he met Tracii, and they hired him on the spot, and off they went.
He was in Girl, I know, with...
That was it, yes. He was in Girl at the time with the Def Leppard guitar player.
Right, Phil Collins. So what year is this when you start cutting their demos?
Boy, let me see. It was probably...
The album comes out in 87.
Oh, it was 86 then, because it was pretty quick. They had all the songs.
Or it may have been 88, actually.
To the record, we cut for the demo. And then we just re-recorded them with, we recut the tracks real quick to get them to sound better, and then Phil sang them.
Okay. I have it written down here that they were signed in 87. And some reason I was thinking that it seemed to take a while, like after the recording, it seemed to either take 5 months or something before they released it. I think they released it at the very beginning, like January of 88, maybe.
Yeah, and that was because they were holding the band out. They wanted them to go on tour, and they were afraid with Guns N' Roses coming out that they wouldn't be able to compete. There was, at the time, those two bands are still pretty closely tied together, and they didn't want that anymore. No, they held it for a little while, but I really didn't know why. That's kind of what I put together.
Yeah, and I told you, that's how I remember a lot of stuff by what I was listening to on what year. Now, of course, we didn't know that Guns N' Roses were going to be the gods that they became, so I viewed both albums kind of the same. They both had a rawness to them. We jammed those. It seemed like the exact same. I like that album just as much as I like Guns N' Roses. We were jamming that all the time.
Oh, thank you. That's nice.
I was surprised all these years later that it's only gone gold. It seems like that one should have definitely been bigger.
Yeah, I would have thought so too. I don't know. There was always a lot of internal strife in LA Guns.
Right, to say the least.
Yeah, always. From day one, there was always something going on with him. Tracii was easygoing and he could get it done, but Philip and Tracii used to bang heads on stuff, and then Mick was just a really, he was a pretty wound tight guy. Things would drive him crazy.
Do you remember any instances? Anything stand out?
I just know mixing the record was difficult with them because I really relied on Tracii for most everything. And, Mick would come in and wouldn't like stuff and just go crazy. And then we'd have to sit down and have, kind of the band thing and have the meeting. And then we'd have to go back to the label and say, okay, what are we going to do here? And the recording of their record was a bit chaotic.
And what, Mick would object to something or the way the record was being done or what?
Yeah, if he didn't like the way something was sounding, or if Tracii did some parts he really didn't like, there was always a bit of a tussle in that band with who got the final call, let's put it that way.
Weird, because he's kind of, he was the bass player, right, initially? And then...
No, Kelly Nichols was the bass player. Mick was the rhythm guitar player.
Okay, it said somewhere in there, I thought that Mick initially started out as the bass player, and then he switched to rhythm guitar, and then that's when they got Kelly from Faster Pussycat.
Yeah, but that was really early. Kelly was in Faster Pussycat, and he got into an motorcycle accident. So Faster Pussycat moved on without him. So he became available. And Kelly was a really good guy and easygoing. Kelly was a nice addition in that band.
Yeah, he always seemed like it. Mick was just rhythm guitar. He wasn't playing any solos, right?
No, he was strictly the rhythm guitar player. But Mick kind of attended to the business at hand in the band. You know, he didn't get a management. Mick was, you know, he had his fingers in everything. And it would annoy people. It happens in any band that there's just this kind of infighting in a way. These guys were pretty young when LA Guns was going. They were young. So, you know, a lot of that is being young. And I don't think any of them were bad people. I don't think any of them were mean. It's just, you know, it's hard. You're a young band in LA. You're trying to make it. And there's a lot of pressure.
Except Phil's a little older than all of them, right? And Steven is as well.
Oh, yeah. Steve was way older. But by the time Steve was really integrated into the band, I was gone. I only did one record with them. I did one record, and we did one live thing together, and that was it.
Once the record's totally finished, that's when he came in.
Yeah. I remember while we were mixing, they were talking about bringing him in, and by the time we were done, he was in.
Okay.
Steve was in. It's funny because I knew Steve from his original band of Bees that was on CBS.
Wow. What year was that?
Oh, God, this was early. This was probably 1978.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I was the assistant engineer on that record, and it's funny what a small world. The record was produced by Tom Werman, and was engineered by a guy named Gary Ladinsky, who I stayed friendly with for I don't know how many years. Gary and I stayed very friendly.
Wow. What was you said Bees?
Yeah, it was BZZZZ, I think was the name. Tommy Holland was the singer. Tommy went on to sing with a shitload of people.
Did you like working with Tom Werman?
Yeah, it was fine. I was the assistant, so, you know, I wasn't doing a whole lot at that time. Yeah, it was when I was at the Village, you know, as an assist, so that had to be 1977, 1978. I stayed very friendly with Gary. He had the remote truck. He had design effects. I rented equipment from him for 20 years.
And so in LA Guns, what were the dynamics within the band? I know you said that Mick is kind of the business guy.
Tracii and Phil wrote the material. I would say they were the definite songwriters of the band. Were Tracii and Philip, and they kind of drove the creative. And Kelly just kind of went along with the flow. Kelly was an easygoing guy and just was like, hey, I'm here to play bass and do my job, and thank you, I'll see you later. So it was really Tracii and Philip who really drove the band. They did all the writing, for sure.
I'm assuming you're cutting the drums first?
Yeah, on that one, we definitely cut it in pieces with if I remember correctly, he played along with Tracii and Mick, the rhythm guitars most of the time he played with. Mick would kind of keep everything in line, and Tracii was the musical director at that point. So that's how I remembered it. He played along with them. He didn't like play by himself to a click track like, you know, somebody like Bobby Blotzer could or that. He definitely worked with other people. I mean, Bobby is a fantastic player.
Just a monster, right.
And Nickey just took more time to get, you know, he had never really, I think, recorded before. So he was, you know, it was getting him used to the studio, getting him used to playing that way. You can definitely tell guys who are doing it for the first time. Very few walk in and just sit down and they're comfortable and they kill it.
I'm assuming for him, you punched in?
Yeah, it was once the Studer A800 came out, punching in drums became pretty easy. You know, it was different when you were working like on an Ampex 1200 or something like that because they weren't nearly as fast. But as soon as the A800 came out, it was like, okay, punching drums is no problem. But before that, I just did, you know, I could edit drums. I'm a drummer, so I could edit drums all day. That was never an issue for me. When I first started working at the Village, I would spend hours, you know, in the back when I was just an assistant, editing old songs just to practice editing. I did it hours. I would sit back there and just edit like a madman. I was doing mashups long before mashups were a thing.
So when you're cutting some of this stuff, now I've interviewed Bo, I've talked to him about it, but Tony Platt was one because he had worked with Mutt Lange. Now Bo didn't seem to quite focus in on syllables, and it seemed like Tony Platt working with Mutt Lange, sometimes Mutt would want to edit in one word. When you were editing like best takes or vocal takes or any takes, would you take like a whole piece or would you be obsessed where you're taking even just the tiniest piece and editing?
No, I mean, honestly, I was more about feel and groove. So I wouldn't be the guy grabbing this word and this word. I would say, oh, I like this line of take 5. I like this line of take 3. It was more lines. Very, very rarely would I switch halfway through a line would I be doing that kind of stuff. I was way more in the bow school.
With Nickey, are you compared to somebody like Ricky Rocket, or where's that on the scale of drummers?
I would take Ricky over Nickey because Ricky may not be the greatest technical player in the world, but he brings something to those songs. He just does. Ricky plays different. And I always really enjoyed Ricky's playing. Ricky enjoyed every minute of playing. He loved it.
What's the vibe in the studio with LA Guns? Are they getting along at that time, other than, say, when Mick would be critical of stuff? Is there a good vibe while you're cutting tracks?
There was, but there was definitely a vibe of, okay, I'm doing my thing, everybody leave me alone. It was a little different. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't, it was not like a Poison experience where, you know, everybody's together and working on things. It was more like, okay, here's my guitar parts. This is the way I like them. This is the way I'm going to do it.
But then again,
it was a little more compartmentalized.
But I would also think you're fully trained working with RATT, right?
Oh, yeah. It was not a new experience at all to do that.
And so compared to something like RATT, the animosity in RATT, would you compare that to LA Guns?
Yeah, yes and no. Yes, I would. And no, because it was different, because RATT was on a much higher scale. There was always tension within RATT. There just always was. I mean, I was fortunate because I got along with everyone. I didn't see it as much, but I know like Bo had major blowouts with a lot of the guys in the band in RATT, and you know, I really didn't with LA Guns. It certainly wasn't the Poison experience of, hey, let's have a great time. It was, okay, let's get this record done. This is work. Yeah, it was not nearly as much fun.
Listening to the LA Guns album again and listening to the drums, I was listening for that room mic, and it definitely had a vibe of that. You're using a lot of that on that record?
Yes, definitely did. Yeah, I hear it too, because, you know, the greatest thing in the world for me is when satellite radio came out, because all these songs that honestly I had forgotten about now, I hear every now and then. I mean, I was driving home from work last night and I heard You're in Trouble from RATT. So I'm like, wow, I haven't heard this in, 10 years. So it's neat. I do enjoy that. And I like listening to it. And, in my head, I go, ooh, I wish I had done that differently. And I wish I had done this differently. The usual thing.
Of course.
That everybody does.
Of course. So with Tracii, I mean, he's just such a badass player. At least he's become just an incredible.
He was. Tracii could always play. Tracii could play. He knew his stuff. I enjoyed it. In fact, I worked with Tracii, many, many years later, a few times after that, with other projects who were looking for guitar players, or if they were doing tributes or stuff like that. Tracii was always a great call.
He's one of those guys that you look at that just totally, you could tell he just still to this day plays all the time.
Yes, he loves playing, and I like Tracii's style. I like the way he plays.
I do too.
He's very aggressive. That's what I liked about him.
Right.
Man, he goes for it.
Do you remember anything about recording his guitars?
Tracii used different amps than I was used to, and for the name of me now, they had Laney stuff to tour with, but in the studio, he used a combination of Marshalls and stuff. But the thing I liked about Tracii was he could play at any time, anything. He wasn't one of those guys that needed 2 hours to warm up, and the sun had to be in the right quadrant. He's like, okay, hand me my guitar, let's go. And when you're cutting solos, are you putting them together, or are you just kind of letting him freestyle over stuff? He would freestyle, but he would think it out as he was going. He would start to formulate it as we were working on it. And then he would look at me, if I was happy with it, I would turn to him and say, hey, do you like this? Are you good with it? And if he said, yeah, on we went. I treated him a lot like Warren, when you really think the guy's a good player. Once I was satisfied, it was up to him to be satisfied. And guys who could really play, it's kind of like you give them the space and let them go. Absolutely. Did they both cut separate tracks, or did Tracii cut everything? No, they cut separate tracks. Mick definitely cut his own rhythm tracks. Definite separation in the band of the two, because they played very different. Tracii played really aggressive and would go for it. Mick was much more, he thought about everything and played tight. I mean, Mick could play, but he wasn't Tracii. Obviously. Did he not solo really at all? I mean, was he not capable of soloing? I do not remember Mick cutting a single solo. I could be wrong on that, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. I do not remember him cutting a solo.
Before we move on from the demos, does anything stand out from cutting anything or anything with Paul or?
No, Paul, Paul was already, Paul had some problems. So he would come in, he would do good work, but he was just kind of unreliable and never really knew what you were going to get because you never knew what kind of shape he'd be in.
And so was it hard cutting vocal tracks with him?
Yes and no. If he was on, it was easy. If he wasn't, it wouldn't be easy. He was inconsistent. And, again, a nice enough guy, but he wasn't. Even when we were doing the demos, I could tell there was something that he wasn't meshing with the rest of the guys. He definitely wasn't.
And
it was like, oh, it's the band and there's our singer.
Right.
Yeah.
And no Paul story or anything from that?
No, he really kept to himself. He kept to himself. He'd come in, he'd do his thing, and then he'd say, okay, do I need anything? Okay, bye. And then he was not involved with the mixing. He wasn't involved in any of that stuff.
And so
the mixing was really Tracii.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's how I've always envisioned the band, even though, of course, he left and then they carried on. And of course, we talked about all the ridiculous versions of them. So I'm assuming Phil coming in, just the fact that he's had success somewhat in Girl, that may be where the head's butt, because he's kind of trying to steer the ship?
A little bit. And I think the difference that I noticed with Phil in the band got more commercial. It was less edgy just because of the way they sang and just the way they were as people. And I think it took a little while for people to accept that. Tracii and Philip got along in the beginning very well, and then it kind of went to shit as things progressed.
And you mean as in success progressed, or that record progressed?
As their success progressed.
But during the recording, they were best of friends? Yeah,
they got along fine. Phil was very new. I mean, he had just come to L.A. when we basically started recording. So it was kind of the new thing, the new guy, and he had some good ideas, and Phil could write a lyric, and he was open to ideas, and it actually went well. Phil, on the first record, it went well.
Guns N' Roses and this record, there's a stripping down a bit that's happening through here. I've talked to Mark Weiss, the photographer, and he even talked about how he was doing a photo shoot for Poison, and it was like just he had done a shoot with them, and then he got mugged, and they stole the film, amongst other things, from him. But he said that the band was incredibly glammed out, and then like just a few months later, he does another shoot, and they're totally toned down. So this is kind of all during that period. I mean, is this like an intentional thing, like with LA Guns, that, hey, we're going to put less cannon sound on the snare? Or are you doing anything like that where you're thinking differently of we want a little bit more rawness?
Well, yeah, I definitely did. Without a doubt, I did. I did not want them to sound like RATT. I didn't want them to sound like Poison. I thought they were a totally different band. They were much more gritty, much more edgy. That's why, if you notice on the LA Guns record, there's not a whole lot of background vocals. There's not a whole lot of cool melodies like we did with RATT or with Poison, because I didn't think it called for it. I mean, I thought they were four on the floor, here we go kind of band. Yeah, well, yeah, I definitely approached it that way, a much more edgy sound.
And was the band kind of thinking, like, wanting something like that as well?
I think so. It's hard to tell what they want. I know Tracii always came to the mixes. Tracii was kind of the guy I leaned on in that band to say, hey, what do you think? What should we do here? Philip would come and go and say, oh, yeah, I like this, I don't like that. And I would listen to Phil. He knew what he was doing. Yeah, I would think they did, because, that's the way everything came out. And it worked. They had a good first record. Like, I prefer the first record way to the second one.
Oh, I think that's the best record to me.
They got kind of soft, and they kind of lost their way, and the songs weren't as good.
I didn't even buy the second one after being just a huge fan of the first. Often I would listen to I always liked that first record. And like we talked about last time, it was something like they captured the essence of LA, either the streets or something. I don't know what it was, but even when I listen back, I think early Motley Crue's the best, early Wasp, of course, early RATT. It always tends to be their best. But I was out with LA Guns by that next record. I didn't even waste my time buying
Yeah,
it.
it didn't do a whole lot for me. I think a lot of times when bands start to overthink their music a bit and get away from what really makes them good. But I mean, I get it. You can't do the same thing over and over either. The really great bands are the ones who can crank out records 2, 3, and 4. As I say, you get your whole life to write record number 1. You get a year to write record number 2.
Right. And really, when you reflect on history from Pink Floyd, who's probably one of my all-time favorites, or Metallica, I mean, you're looking at like, what did the greats do? And the greats really, the greatest of greats, really only had 4, 5 albums at most that they did that were absolutely classic. And then most bands, Black and Blue, their first record, I thought was amazing, and then I don't think they ever did anything close to the same with Wasp. I thought Wasp petered out real quick, and then Motley Crue took a little longer. I would get into their stuff because I was a fan. And RATT, I was a fan all the way until the grunge movement, really. They would always at least come up with great hooks. So,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, they could write a hook. Warren and Robin. I mean, Robin wrote a lot of the really popular songs were really Robin and Steven.
That's what I asked Bo. Like, I think on our very first interview, I said, just analyzing RATT, it seemed like the less Robin was involved, that was their problem. It seemed like he was kind of crucial in not being the guitar hero, but the songwriting aspect.
100%. I agree. 100% I agree with that. Yeah. Robin could write him a song.
And he still wrote, he still had credits, even though he was fucked up and everybody's like, oh, he's not really showing up. He had credits till the end, but I always assumed that those were smaller kind of contributions.
Tiny, yeah. And it was more, hey, Rob's still in the band, let's not push him out kind of stuff. Robin really faded away by the third record. He just wasn't himself.
Now with Phil, I'm assuming he seems to be a great singer. So was he pretty easy to work with?
Yes, Phil was easy to work. He knew his stuff. He was a pro. He would come in and knock it out. Phil was not a problem at all.
And you cut that at Village. Was that on a Neve?
Yeah, the Village at the time was 100%. Oh, well, no, let me think about this. At one point, they took the 8068 out of A and put in an SSL. And I don't remember if we worked on the SSL, because I know we cut it in Studio D on the 8078, because that was my favorite room and favorite console in the world. And then we mixed it in B on the 8108. And I can't remember if in Studio A at the time, if it was still the 8058 or if they had gone to the Neve at that point. I mean, to the SSL, sorry.
But with Phil's voice, it sounds like you're doubling quite a bit, right?
Yes, I did. Double Phil, yes.
What do you remember most about those sessions?
I remember them being a little more tense than I was used to. As a producer, with the RATT sessions, they might have been tense with Bo in the band, but they never were for me because I was just the engineer. And that's kind of how it works in tense sessions. You know, you become good cop, bad cop, the engineer and the producer. You know, they feel like, oh, the producer's not on our side. That's why you'll see so many records that their engineer eventually becomes their producer. And that was the one thing that it was a little more tense to get that record done than I was used to.
And I read somewhere that the album took 6 weeks to record.
Yeah, six weeks and 2 weeks rehearsal. Yeah, that was probably 8 weeks. 8 weeks was always my goal to get a record done. To me, that was long. And
I'm assuming, like Bo, you liked to do, he was a big fan of pre-production?
Yes. Okay. By the time we hit the studio, I knew those songs as well as the band did.
Is there any reason you don't do that next record?
Yeah, the first one was just too tense. Honestly, by the time I was done, I'm like, adios, boys, good luck. I mean, I didn't feel that way with the whole band, but overall, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's I've had enough of this one. It was also, I think, time for me to do something different. Instead of just doing hard rock band and hard rock band and hard rock band.
And so what, you're like wanting to get into pop or thrash or what?
No, just, I liked anything that was aggressive. Let's put it, anything that wasn't safe, I liked. So I just started to get into different kind of stuff. Like I really, really wanted to do the Jane's Addiction record.
Oh, wow.
And I went to rehearsals with them for a long time. and got really close. And then at the last minute, they went, I don't remember who did their first record, but like I really wanted to do their record. I really wanted to do Soundgarden's record, and I was supposed to, and then it fell apart in the end.
Was that Bad Motorfinger, or are you talking earlier?
It was right when they signed to A&M. The guy who signed them to A&M, cannot remember his name. He was the one who called me and said, hey, I got this band. And we saw him, and I'm like, oh, my God, these guys are great.
Howard Benson, is this the producer, Howard Benson, that does the string arrangements on LA Guns?
Yes, it is. It is Howard. God, I forgot that. Yes, it was Howard.
Wow. How does that come about?
Because he was involved with TSOL. Yeah, and that's how I met Howard. And Howard was Howard was in a band. I can't remember the name of his band. And then, we needed to do some string stuff and that. And yeah, so I said, hey, I know this guy that I've worked with through TSOL. He's really cool. He's really good. And yeah, Howard came in and did it. God, I totally forgot that. Howard and I worked together for quite a while. I liked Howard a lot.
And then Howard, became, I don't know was he a producer at that time?
Yes, he had just started producing at that time.
That's incredible because he became a huge producer. His discography is massive and had a lot of success later on.
Yeah, oh yeah, he did. And then he went on to be a head of A&R to label. Yeah, Howard was way cool. I liked Howard.
So do you recall what the budget was for the LA Guns record?
Maybe like $75,000.
Okay. And are you getting a deal at the Village or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they always cut me a really good deal because I was still working there at the time. Yeah, so they would cut me a really nice deal to work there. And my thing was that I would work, 7 days a week so we could get done and get out of the way.
Yeah, I think Bo would say he'd book it by the week, and then but then they'd usually take a day off. Did you work every day?
It would depend. Sometimes I would work every day. Sometimes I would take a day off. Like I know with Bo, we always worked Monday through Friday from like 10 to 10. And then Saturday was our short day. We worked from 10 to 6, and then we'd go out on Saturday night and just get destroyed.
Bo didn't go out, or Bo would join you?
Sometimes Bo would join us. Sometimes he wouldn't. And then sometimes just Bo and I would go. If we would do stuff at the time, Bo was really fun. I remember one night, me, Bo, Juan, and I think Warren maybe, or Robin, we went to see AC/DC at the Forum one night, the four of us. And we got so hammered on the way home. I had a black Honda Civic, and Bo and I were in my car driving home. And somehow, some way, I went on a road that was under construction, and we popped all the tires and had to leave the car and get a ride home, and the next day go get it. I had a lot of fun with Bo.
So anything else with this record? Any other story that we're leaving on the table?
Let me think. No, that was really it with LA Guns, and it did well. It came out and it did well. And again, the band just toured nonstop, which really made it happen. And Tracii and Phil were really good live together. They played off each other really well.
Were you pleased with the record in the end?
Yeah, like anything, there was things I would do different. But yeah, I was. I thought it was a good record, and I think the sales kind of catapulted it. And now when people seem to think LA Guns, it's more and more like their first record was their pinnacle.
Absolutely. What's something that you would have done differently?
I would have gotten a tighter drum sound. I would have tightened it up a bit. A little more organic, a little more tight.
You would have probably needed Riley for that, right?
Yeah, part of it was Nickey was not, to get him to hit the center of the drum was not the easiest thing in the world. So, I think Riley would have made a big difference in that because Steve, I definitely would have done that.
Are you editing on drums like that? Are you like taking one nice hit of the snare and editing that in?
No, I was not. I would take takes. We would cut takes together to get stuff to work. But no, I was never one of those guys like, oh, that's the perfect snare hit. Because I think on a record like that, it's not generic. It's not when you go see them live. It's, I always felt like that with that type of band, that doesn't work. With a band like RATT, we could be really precise and be really exacting because that was the way they were as a band. But I didn't think LA Guns was that. I saw Tracii not long ago, Tracii Guns, on some TV show.
Yeah, he's doing well. He got back together with Phil, and they were kind of doing really well together.
Oh, were they? Because I know at one point there were two versions of LA Guns.
Oh, there's
Steve
still.
Riley had his version.
Oh, there still is, yeah.
I don't know. I honestly, I don't keep up with it.
They're having that right now. In fact, Steve Riley got, I don't know, one of the other guys, the bass player maybe.
Oh, Kelly?
Yeah, I think so. And so they're in that version of LA Guns. Tracii and him equally own the trademark on the name. And
really? That's interesting, because Steve's not the original drummer.
I know. He didn't even cut the drums on that record, right?
No, he didn't. We cut it with Nickey, the original drummer. We cut the record with him, and they fired him right after he did the record, because getting him to cut the drums was not easy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was... Yeah, so there's two, which is funny because Tracii had left LA Guns like right before a tour to form a band with Nikki Sixx way back, and then just like abandoned them, and then he put together like several versions of LA Guns while they were still LA Guns, and then he finally made up with Phil, but I think Steven had said something, about Tracii at some point that Tracii was like, we got to kick him out or something. And so the drama just keeps continuing. And so, now just recently, Riley's version of LA Guns is about to release. They announced like a new album.
Oh my God. Between LA Guns and RATT and the different versions of the band, it's hysterical.
It's even become a joke online. They'll talk about just unrelated bands, like say LA Guns is getting together and they'll say, we want to see Bobby Blotzer's LA Guns. It's
oh God, it never ends.
It's hysterical.
Well, that's why I think I was so happy when Poison finally put all their difficulties aside and decided to reform. And we talked about it, and one thing I said was, you guys, the glory days are over. You're never going to sell 1 million records again. Go out there and take this opportunity. You're really being petty.
Oh, and not only that, I'm not sure everybody totally understands the importance of that classic lineup. Even if the lineup improved by getting, say, a better drummer or, like Slayer with not getting back together with Dave Lombardo, I'm like, man, he was like the key of Slayer in my book. I kind of liked how RATT got Carlos Cavazo for a while. It's like,
oh yeah, Carlos was a great addition to that band.
It would have been great if Robin would still have been alive, but he wasn't. Right. So you can understand those. But RATT was a perfect example of, those guys, they all seem to just despise each other. So
you're right.
And after talking to Bo, it's like they really did. That's how we all perceived it. It doesn't seem like really any of them get along, even when they get back together, and it still seems like they're just tolerating each other.
Yeah, it's very contentious. I've never understood why, and to me, it's kind of petty. Let it go. I always say, hey, if the Eagles can do it, anybody can do it.
Right. Yeah, I think RATT should even get Bobby Blotzer back in and just even.
Oh, 100%. It's an hour and a half a night. You got to play together. That's all. Like I said, I get along still with all of the guys in the band. I have no problem with any of them. And yet they can't get together. They're missing a golden opportunity at this point.
Well, even when they finally got Juan back in the corporation, and then they were like, we kicked him out improperly, and then so they all voted to throw Bobby out because of what Bobby did by taking a whole different version of the band out on the road. Right. So then they all three, including Warren, are able to throw him out of the band, and then Warren leaves.
Well, he left, got pushed. It depends on who you talk to in that situation.
Did he really?
Yeah, there was a lot. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes things with that band.
I thought it was maybe just because he didn't really want to tour, and I know Bobby's made it public that Warren's from the Mars Candy family or whatever, so he doesn't need to really make any money.
Yes and no. I think he wants to tour, but he wants to tour in the right way, and I think to Warren, going out and playing anything is not really correct. So, in a way, I see his point. And again, I don't think anybody knows what goes on in the closed-door meetings. So who knows the real reason? But I know that, some guys will go out and play anywhere, anytime, anything, and other guys won't. They're like, it's not worth it. By the time we do it, and we cover our costs, we don't make any money. Why are we doing it? Why are we deteriorating our brand?
Right.
You know, if we hold out and do just the bigger ones, hey, again, it's the reason bands all break up. Are we protecting our brand by not playing Johnny's birthday party down the street?
Which I think is true. To not play as many does protect your brand. But then some guys, I don't think, save their money. Even a little bit is better than nothing, and they need to squeak out. Even if it's $30,000 a year, you know, by the end, it's still paying some bills.
I agree. They're desperate for the cash and the need for something to do, and that gratitude. I think a lot of them have. They just got to have it, but they just can't get it through their heads that the glory days are over. And wait, pick your battles now.